Welcome to Indian Podcasting Revolution, and I'm your host Rohit Kokane. In our newest series, PodPeeps, we pull back the curtains and step behind the microphone with some of the nation's most successful, innovative, and influential self-starter podcasters. From sharing their unique podcast journeys to unearthing their creative processes, PodPeeps is not just about the podcasting, it's about the people, the brave and visionary individuals who dare to use their voice and change the game. Today, we have with us Siju Mathews, a podcaster, storyteller, and video presenter. She is the host of the Totally Indian Football Show, which aims to bring you the stories from the playing field as our favorite players, coaches, etc. why to be crowned as champions, and also conversations from across the Indian football field. This will be a podcast for all you Indian football fans. Let's explore with Siju on how they are keeping the sports fan on the edge of excitement through their successful podcast show. I'm sure you won't miss out on this episode where she will share all about her podcasting journey. So, are you ready? Let's tune into the voices of change, the voices of India. Welcome to PodPeeps on the Indian Podcasting Revolution. Hi Siju, welcome on Indian Podcasting Revolution. It is such a pleasure to host you.
Thank you so much. I think it's not very often I sit on the other side of the mic, but sometimes it I think might feel good. But hopefully we have a good conversation, and for those listening from this, also gather some inputs.
Definitely, and it's always a great thing to be on the other side and share your insights, because then there are people who are wanting to start their own podcast. There are people who are willing to scale them as well. So it's always a good experience. And podcasting is rising. If you have seen the trend with respect to how many people are doing it, definitely it is rising. But the kind of podcast that you have been doing, it's totally a very different thing. It is the first time that I have been interacting with the sports podcaster, and that to football. So definitely it's going to be a great conversation. But before we move ahead, I want to know, like, before podcast, where did your love for Indian football and the storytelling come from? Like, any memorable early encounters with respect to that?
Well, so that takes me back to my first ever job. So I started off as a journalist and I was working for a website called The Fan Garage. So that's where it probably all began with writing on, reporting on football and Indian badminton. So, and this was a website focused only on Indian sports and Indian athletes. So, I mean, a bit before that, my introduction to Indian football was in 2014 with an internship I had done for Hindustan Times. This was before I would complete my third year. And I mean, by God's grace, I would say everything fell in place where I got an internship with the sports desk at the HT. Usually, we are often told that interns don't get what they want, but I exactly got what I wanted. So, and the editor Sanjeev Samyal sir, he was like, "Okay, you like football? Okay, I'll send you for to cover football matches." So we have the MDFA. Back then it was called the MDFA. Now it's called the Mumbai Football Association. They have the LE division that happens at Parel Ground, and you can also LE division also happens in the Cooperage in Churchgate. So you can go, wherever the matches are. So he put me in touch. There were a few seniors on ground as well who helped me. His name was Gordon. So that's where my introduction to Indian football happened, because I was also one of those, grown up in Bombay, no Zuli, Premier Leagues and all of those things. I didn't have introduction much to Indian football as growing up. So I was like, oh, there's a I League. I was one of those who was excited for ISL. And then I got to know there's something called as I League as well. There's also football in my local scene happening, pretty predominant, and not, if not great, but at least there's some scene going on. So while I was covering and doing that internship was my introduction to Indian football. And then it just began from there. I think after graduation, got this job. Yeah. There it just started off, and again I was covering football in depth. I've covered tournaments. So I think the storytelling bit has in me because it's come from the whole journalism background, I would say. And also because, you're always a fan. Somewhere you're always a fan who wants to share stories, who want to know about these players or these coaches that you keep seeing. So that way, that's how it began. And predominantly now storytelling, because, after so many years, you've had your heartbreaks following covering Indian football. Then you're like, whatever is happening on ground, you can't do much about it. So let's just talk about people who've really done some good work or are doing some good work, on whom there's no light upon, or they're not in the limelight because they're not players or coaches. And that's exactly where Humans of Indian Football came into being. So yeah, I would say probably going back was, I think the journalist in me is still there. That's how I kind of call it, the storytelling part of it comes from.
Such a fascinating journey, Siju, because many of them start or do some kind of a thing because they are totally into it. Like, so were you into any kind of a sports into your school and college days, or it was just through your career into journalism that pushed you to into this particular field?
No, yes, it was definitely growing up. I've played all kind of sport thanks to all the boys who I grew up with. So whatever they played, I played, and football stuck with me because yeah, it was a fascinating sport. I played first because you're the only girl, so I was made the goalkeeper. But it was fun as well, and I think maybe I was 8 or 9. I started watching it because everyone around me were watching, and grew up as a United fan. Not very proud of it at this point, but yeah, you do things. So I think that's how it just began, to cover. I mean, watching football, and then just the interest in other sports like cricket, of course, because you're in India, and a bit of tennis here and there and stuff. So I think, yeah, the sports fan probably started off from there, and then after 10th, I was like, okay, I wish I could do something in sports because the time of wanting to be a player had gone by. There was nothing much in school for us girls. I did play a very small stint in college, in this university level, a couple of games here and there. But the interest grew even more to be part or be associated in some way with sports. And that's where I got introduced by my cousin and people around saying, okay, do journalism, maybe become a journalist. And then the whole intention was, okay, let's do that and, write about stories so you're closer to the sport. So yeah.
Cool. Because for me, it was more about badminton. In my school days, I played divisional level with respect to badminton, but I had to quit for certain reasons. That is how it works in India typically. Like, you have to focus on career as well, you have to get good at sports as well. But yeah, not feeling bad about that as of now. But when we talk into the podcasting perspective with respect to the humans of football or the totally Indian football show, was there any specific moment or experience that fueled your passion to get into podcasting? Like, what was the whole idea? What was the conversation that happened that we have to do or we have to start this kind of a podcast show that will help the audience, the listeners, or whoever wants to play or listen more about football?
Yeah, that also takes me back to my first job, like I said, the fan garage, because my introduction to podcast also happened there. Thanks to my then boss, CP Thomas, and my senior colleagues, Nikhil, and we had a partnership with IVM back then, Indusworks Media. I think you can just say that probably they started off the whole revolutionizing of podcast or got podcast to India. And you know our bosses, their boss and our boss were friends, and they were looking for a show specifically to football or sports rather, and that's how it began. And then eventually there was also a growth and craze and support for Indian football on Twitter. So seeing that there was a community growing, so we realized that initially when it started it was a cricket show, and then it was a show where it housed all kind of sports. So we were all there as panelists, me and my other colleagues. I would speak on badminton, a bit on football. My other colleague would speak on cricket and stuff like that. So, but because we saw the growth and how the chat and the buzz around Indian football was there, we were like, okay, this looks like, Indian football can have a show on its own. So, and yeah, I started off again as a panel and then a co host and then eventually a host. So, I mean, to keep it short that way. So, it goes back, I think, 2016 or 17, if I'm not wrong. So that's how it began. And for me, it was like I enjoy speaking, I enjoy talking, I enjoy having conversations. So that way it came, you can say probably it comes naturally. But I still remember my first ever time I was sitting in the studio space and recording, and I think I must have taken 5 to 8 retakes. And I remember my sound engineer then was like, "It's okay, Siju, we have all day." I mean, of course, we didn't have all day, but he was sweet, kind enough to say that. But I think, yeah, it's looking back, I see that's where it all started off. And I think we had a tie up then with Geo Savan because they were getting into original programming. And we were one of the shows under IVM that was on Geo Savan. So it was like a 325 episode contract apparently. So we had to put one episode every day. Now, Indian football calendar, if you look at, it's hardly 4 to 5 months. So it's more than, I mean, having a season full fledged, it's more of an off season. So you're like, okay, what do we speak every day if you have to put an episode? But eventually, I think three people who love to talk can always talk about anything in Indian football and pick up anything. So I had my colleague was a more diehard Mohan Bagan fan. So we always had banter up here and there. So we had some topic or the other. Though we ended up saying, okay, what do we talk about? But our episodes would always be close to an hour. So, and then I think, yeah, that kind of gave me that confidence. Okay, because you had that, you're putting an episode every day, right? And also the comfort of doing it behind closed doors. Nobody's looking at you. You don't have to kind of look presentable, but just your voice. So that I got comfort into that, and I'm like, I really enjoyed. When did we start the Totally Indian Football show? Why? Because after I left the fan garage, there was a gap between me and doing podcast. When I moved to another job, I wanted to start, but things couldn't take off there. So when Ajay, a dear friend, a very dear friend now, was back then an academy owner, and that's how we knew of each other. So back in 2019, he approached me saying, I have an idea. Would like if you can be part of it as well. So that's the whole conversation of humans of Indian football, where like, you're a journalist, you have connects, can we do more for the Indian football scene? Cover stories of people, everyone out there. And I was like, okay, that's a good way to look at it, because being a journalist, you have your own limitations, right? You can't write or cover about everyone that you want to. It's mainly the players, the coaches, or the management at that level. But what about a ground manager? What about a commentator? What about a broadcaster? So all of these things, then we were like, okay, let's do it then. I think we can cover more people, young and old, new and the ones who've been there for a very long time. Podcast actually began in 2020 because I wanted to get back to podcast. I was like, this is a huge gap, and I have fallen in love with this medium. I cannot keep myself away from this. Because this was our own, I was like pestering. So it's me, Ajay, and Vinay who work on closely on this project. So I was telling the boys that, I am done. I can't read anymore. Let's start the show. So that's how it happened, and the Totally Indian Football Show was born. In November, we started off during the season. I remember, like, thanks to all my journo friends who I called and said, I'm starting a show. Will you be on my panel? We'll talk about the ISL League games. We'll make it interesting and fun. And they were very sweet to say yes. And yeah, they've always been there on the other side of the call to receive it and just come on the show. Even like a day before, I've asked them, I don't have an episode. Can you just come? So yeah, shout out to all of them, Marco, Sandeep, Sayak, and Ajay, who were part of my first ever panel as a panelist on the show. And then, I mean, if I were to continue speaking about this bit we had then in 2021, the whole second wave bit happened and all of those. So we were like, how do we continue the show? Because we initially launched saying this will only go on till the season ends. So the season ends in 4 months, and now you're like, okay, now what? And we kind of got a decent gaze, I would say, not in numbers, but just that people knew, okay. And because people are also familiar with me doing podcasts, they associated that, oh, okay, podcast is back, or I'm back doing shows and stuff. And then thanks again, like, to my mentor, who I consider as one. Her name is May. She has her own podcasting production called Made in India, and her show as well. So she kind of, and I actually, before starting the show, I reached out to her. I had a 45-minute conversation asking her, how do I go about and what do I invest in and stuff like that. So she knew about what I was doing. So she remembered that, and then she connected me to Idea Brew Studios, which is now the Binge Pods, an audio production house, which, she kind of got us to meet each other. And then they were kind enough, Aditya and team have been kind enough to take us under their board, because literally, to be honest, like, if you look at numbers back then, we had done 20 episodes and numbers were as equal to zero. So they literally took us on board because of the idea, the concept. It's different and it's niche and all of that, knowing that it will take a lot of time to reach the masses, kind of a thing. So yeah, I think 2021 October was the newly rebranded Totally Indian Football Show by Humans of Indian Football, produced by Idea Brews, was launched. And even their expertise and understanding helped us, because then I don't have four people on my show talking for an hour. But we have like a sweet spot of 30 to 40 minutes max, and the guest maximum is only two, so it's a ratio of 1:2, and it's more of conversations. That's how I would put it, because it's more of their story. I think, yeah, I mean, it's not, because people always have that thing of, is it an interview? So yeah, it's a very thin line probably between an interview and a conversation, but I would like to put it out as it's a conversation with the person. It's getting to know that person a little bit more. And yeah, for me, it's less like I'm enjoying talking to that person. So yeah.
Totally, and I could relate to each and everything that you said, because if you ask me, I don't come from a media background, and how difficult it was for me to start with a podcast, keep going at it. Because, see, when you are aware of the nitty gritties of certain fields, it gets a bit easier. I won't say everything is easier for each and every individual, but it's more about like you are able to figure it out, you are into that particular groove. So, it's more about that particular factor. So if anyone is willing to start their own, or if they're figuring out like how would I be approaching, so you have totally given that particular approach. And I could see the power of networking as well. You interacted with a lot of people, you just called them, you shared your idea as well, and that really helped you to gather that particular momentum. Because usually people keep all of these things to themselves, like I want to do it, but then I might be sounding so weird, or I might be, people will be making fun of me, or some things like that. So we just have to be making sure of ourselves that no matter what a person says or how you are feeling at that particular moment, we just have to get started with the right intent. And then if you are willing to invest our time into this, then it will be getting easier. But then, Siju, was this a kind of a leap of faith into the unknown for you? Because journalism on one side is quite a good job as well, but having these conversations with respect to the thing that you are covering, was this something which was very unknown to you? How was that particular moment?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't put it that way because, like I said, while I got introduced to podcast while I was a journalist as well. So you're doing the traditional thing that a journalist does, which is like reporting, writing, going out there and covering events and stuff. At the same time is where I got the exposure of podcast. And I can say that I was there at the right time, at the right place, because when IVM came down and the podcasting scene all started off, I was there. And that's where exactly I got the exposure. So 300, 400 plus episodes I've done, in that 2.5 years I worked with them. So I was already had that bag full of experience, and I also had a mentor who I kept in touch with. Like May also I know because she was back then the creative head from IVM side. So I, though we were not speaking every day, but I made sure if it was something to do with podcast, I would run to her, and she always took me under her wings. So that way I've like really blessed to have mentors as well in different aspects of life and different aspects of career path as well. So it's very important. It's though it may look like, oh, one person did it all, it's like me of people behind you who really helped me and pushed me. So because otherwise it wouldn't have been easy, right, for me, or that comfort space that I would have. Because when I got to podcast and when I got used to it and I got a hang of it, I was like, that's where the whole thing of my liking towards writing kind of faded off. I mean, in a way where my package of that conversation was the writing. I rather
The
converse. Yeah,
same thing for
yeah.
me.
So
Yeah.
I can do a feature writing, but ask me to write about reports, I'm like, I'm just so bored right now. So that's how it kind of shaped, like my writing limited to writing for the show or writing captions for your social media because I worked in that aspect as well. So that's how it kind of limited, but it gave me more room to talk to people. And I mean, people have been kind enough to say that I make them comfortable and they speak openly and they can do that. So I'm like, that's a blessing. And I mean, praise God for that. But leap of faith, I would say, was I getting into the unknown with this particular project? Not really. 2.5 years, like you mentioned, the contacts and network. The 2.5 years I really worked at the fan garage, I really also built, I mean, I can say a small little brand about for me also, because whether you like it or not, at the podcast scene on that Indian football show, you were listening to my voice, right? When you started the show, when you because I was a host, and somewhere or the other, being the only woman around there also helped me in my favor. And so when I was getting back with this particular show, I was only excited, right? Because and I knew, like, I have built a rapport with people who I can just pick up the phone and just tell them and ask them, I'm doing this, will you help me or will you come on the show? So that's how it was. And I, yeah, I mean, I can always say that, but everyone around me have been really kind and supportive, very encouraging, whether it's coaches, the players, and everyone who's come on the show more than once. If they've come on the show more than once, then you should know that they really are those cheerleaders for me and what I do. So yeah, and I think then people also took to the interest that they knew why they were coming to us, like, or why they are tuning into the Total Indian Football Show, or why they are following Humans of Indian Football. Because One thing I knew that I remember telling Ajay and Vinay also at the start that we may not get numbers very easily. We may not get into those thousands and 10,000s of followers, but we will be known for our credibility. Like we will be known because of the credible people that come on our show, the people that we feature, and the people that we'll tell and talk about us. And I think that is like what we are seeing right now is a testament of that. We really saw that. So again, like people have been super kind. That's all I can say. So yeah, to answer your question, was it like the unknown? Definitely not. Yes, the network helped. Yes, that rapport really helps. So yeah, it was not into the unknown. So thanks to Ajay also for trusting me that we can just pull this off.
Definitely. And it's totally fascinating to see that the way you have built up that particular confidence to go into that particular arena and have those conversations. Because when people think about podcasting, the first and the foremost thing that comes to their mind is like about having that particular interview with a guest or whoever they are talking to. If it is a monologue, then that is a very different story. But when two or more people are interacting, it has to be a kind of a conversation where you just two are focusing on to that particular aspect, and you don't care about like what others are going to think about what you have spoke into that particular moment. So that is how it gets more serious, that is how it grows. And the kind of support you had, the kind of help that you took really set up that particular stage. But now then, talking about the guest selection or the people you call or the episode format that you're running, so, did it help you to create a unique identity? Like, does it exist another show into the football thing? I'm not well aware of that. I would love to know from you. And while doing it, what were the aspects that were totally non negotiable for you? Like, you can't proceed before doing all of this stuff. So, how is the thing about that thing?
So basically, I mean, was there anything non-negotiable? I'm looking at the structure and stuff. You put it out so well that I'm like, okay, is there even a structure to my show? Okay. To say that, how do I go about with selection of guests? What helped me the most, I would say, like I said, with binge pods or idea brews coming in, was helping me kind of set up a calendar also per se. Like then it put me to work with regards to who do I want to call, how do I go about it, and what the conversation will be like. Now, do I have a script in place? Not like a proper full fledged script. When a guest asks me, like, give me questions, I'm like, I don't have questions for you. I have talking points, and this is the gist of the conversation that will be like. Now, the reason being is also, even if I have questions, I don't want them to, like, kind of come. It's not about not coming prepared. I don't want it to be like a question and answer session, right? Because also the something I've practiced when I used to even go to interview players or anyone else in the sporting field. Another thing was my editors never gave me like, okay, you have to get this headline for this particular event, so you have to ask him this question or get him to answer somehow or the other. So because they didn't have that external, I didn't have any external pressure. I just developed my own process of, okay, I will have a set of things. I'll do my research. I'll read up as much as possible about the player or about the particular guest. Also see if they have done any interviews in the past, any recent interviews, and if I can take some cues from that, provided I give, of course, credit to that interview as well. So then the conversation is a mix of that. So if I have to, like, mainly because the show centers around getting to know what this person does, considering that the larger audience or the larger people who are following Indian football don't know much about them. So I just tell them it's about you. Okay, it's about what you've done, your journey. And if you are whatever, if the person is a coach or an entrepreneur, then your journey into that. And we'll just also talk about in general Indian football and discuss about that and where you fit in, because that also gives me a room for when we are having the conversation to pick something from what he or she has said, and then kind of dig more into that if it's an interesting anecdote or something. So that's how I kind of go about. But there have been episodes where I've sat unprepared and before every episode I've been nervous, that is there. But there was this one episode where I was doing a very interesting one of my favorites, I would say, was with Pulasthar and Darren Caldera. Now Darren Caldera is a former player, and he had just recently retired, and he got into commentary, doing football commentary. And Pulasta is a journalist who's turned into a broadcaster and a commentator. So it was the first time that they were doing together a tournament. I think, was it the Duran Cup, if I'm not wrong? And there was a lot of buzz about it on Twitter. among the Indian football fans, praising them and, kind of appreciating them doing it together. And there was a praise around it. So I was like, okay, can I get them both together on the show? And that episode, I remember I think, doing it from a friend's place, and I reached there and I was working, so I couldn't have time to write down or do any kind of research work or anything. So I just scribbled down something, and I opened up and I went for the recording. And I'm like, okay, whatever, however it goes. It turned out to be one of the best episodes. And in the end, both of them were so happy the way it went about. Even my producer on the show said, this is one of your best. I'm like, okay, so so I have to make note of this. The day I'm not prepared, maybe it is turns out to be the best one. But I also credit that to the person. I mean, in that particular episode, it was them both, right? A key in a podcast situation is the opposite person also have to talk, you know, because that's the dilemma that we have, like especially in Indian football. Not We all want to get players, right? Because one, it's the eyeball, the other, I mean, here in this context, the ears that catch you. But it's the known faces that we want to get, players or coaches. But not every player can speak. No, I'm not saying in a way that, or converse, right? They are known to be athletes, they're known to be players, so they do their talking on the pitch. So they may not be good speakers as such or good talkers as either. So that's something where I pick and choose which player do I get, I can't get everyone and everyone, because then it'll be like a monologue, or you'll just hear one yes or a no in between. And that'll be so sad because it's an audio show, it's not even video. So that's how, like, getting more people, and I think I just feed off the energy that the my guests like come on with, because they have stories. All I have to do is nudge them, that's all. Just help them navigate through the stories, or help them think through what are they going to talk about. Because each of them, I remember, I mean, I don't know when this episode will be out, but the episode I did for my show recently was number 99, and she's one of the only person in the broadcast team for the ISL at this point. So she had like, and she's worked on many events in the broadcast team, FIFA World Cup, ISL, IPL, and stuff. And she's got a plethora of stories, like a bag full of stories. And I was like, wow, like, just for me to be able to share them out with, say, even if the 100 odd people who listen to my episodes every time it's out, I think it's really, it's really a blessing to be that vehicle. I'm sure even that's what you feel like, because what you're doing is also that you're just helping and elevating people's stories to come out so that many others can hear.
Curiosity always drives the intent of storytelling, is what I believe. And if you are true at it, then I feel that it will get amplified, is the kind of experience I had with my own podcasting journey. Because you did talk about having those guests, you did talk about like who do you want to call upon, and following that particular cohesive flow as well. So when you are doing all of it, like say you do have this thing in mind that I have to get that particular person because they have these stories to tell. It often happens that people may not be existing on social media, but they have lived their life to a such extent that they have got all of those experience and they want to share it somewhere down the line. So while having those people onto the board, or like when you're recording, how do you try to balance those diverse perspectives? Because when we talk in respect of the podcasting perspective, it's more about like you just have to balance certain things. You can't just go wayward into that particular thing, or you don't have to hurt the sentiments of the other people as well with respect to what their opinions are. Again, it's more about the individual opinion, but then we have to take care of all of those elements. So what's your way of balancing those perspectives? Because like how journalism works. If you write something, a person might be projecting a negative story as well, a positive as well. So during all these things, what's your approach towards that particular thing in with respect to podcasting?
In terms of the way I tell, I mean, the stories or whatever you share, the people that I get on the show, one thing I'm sure of is what I want to tell on the show through this person, right? Or about this person. For example, if it's a coach, I can do two things with a coach. One is get him for a preview or a review of a tournament, because that's then you bringing him on for a coach's perspective, because he's the expert, and and it's a good thing to do that, because I don't know, I've not been a coach, so what is the coach thinking, or how does he think, or how does he go about with getting his formations done, or why is he doing certain things, is what a coach can actually bring onto the table. Another way of looking at is that what is his journey like, right? So I can't club both of them together. For example, if we recently got done, I mean, Asian Cup is going on, but unfortunately Indian team's dreams are over. So I can't get a coach and talk about his journey and then do a preview and ask him his thoughts about how is India going to do. You will sit there for 2-3 hours. I mean, there is a scope for that, but for us it was not there, because we want to focus it completely different. Like, for example, we've had Floyd Pinto, coach FP as he's called, multiple times on the show, and he's a dear friend of ours. So we've had him initially was for any kind of a preview or a review, ahead of a tournament, or about talking about a team or a club. But the recent one, the latest one, sometime last year we did, was about his journey and insight into his 14 years or 15 years that he spent into coaching. So that's one thing that I'm clear of. Though I said I don't have a structure in place, is what I meant. Maybe it puts out in the wrong way, but I am very clear with what I want to tell in this particular episode. It's either the person's journey or something very particular. Like, even though we've done episodes with a sports agent who's now also going to be a very dear friend of mine, we did a two-part series with him, in fact, where we were dissecting and we asked him, can we discuss about what is the role of a sports agent? And it's looked at as a dirty business, right? Sports agents. So we first kind of dealt with what does a sports agent do, why is it a dirty business, and where are the nitty gritties and all of those things. Then the second part was about his agency, specifically about his agency, and then his journey into it and stuff like that. So there's always ways. And also, when you mentioned about balancing, I am one of those who I don't want to be controversial for the sake of being controversial. You know, like, everyone's talking about it, everyone is now abusing AIFF, everyone's now doing this, doing that. I think I've been in the system. I mean, into the system, working closely with people from both sides. So I kind of understand a little bit more. So I don't want to be like driving along with the fans. Like, I don't want to be just a fan right now, because I'm not. Because you get to know things. At the same time, you're not like, it's not like you're not holding questions or you're not holding people responsible. Of course, today if I get someone from AIFF on the show, I will ask them questions. If I get someone from ISL, I will ask them the questions. But not because I want to like get more eyeballs or get the gaze and get into the whole bandwagon of wanting to make it controversial because of the sake of it. There has to be a balanced conversation, right? If you're asking the question, it has to be also backed by facts and backed by why you're asking those questions. And I think we've had that balance, I mean, without hurting anyone's sentiments. And that's exactly how there has been a question of why, what, and all of that. But I think the guests have also been kind enough to mention it. And I'm okay also for a response when someone wants to say no comments. I'm fine with that.
I totally get it. And it's all about that we have to take care because we are running a show. We are like kind of a fans too. We are promoting the kind of culture that we are having with respect to the sports as well. And our intent is always about like promoting the good aspects of it, because if we are doing that, then we may see the craze for the show, the craze for the sports may be coming, and then more and more people will be willing to do such kind of things as well. But I've seen, like, if we talk about the Indian football scenario, I see that there are more fans than the players. And that is very true for the kind of scenario we have been seeing. We are hoping that India gets into that particular Olympic, like they'll be playing Olympics as well. But when you are catering the content to a various, say, like diverse spectrum of Indian football fans, so like how do you address that particular segment? Because there may be rivalries, there may be local teams, there may be national interest which are attached to the fans. So what's the structure, what's the discussion that you people have within your team, and then while rolling out that particular episode?
So mainly it has always been, from the start about individuals or people coming onto the show and catering to. But when the season is on is where I kind of be a bit on with purpose. Like, I get and try and see to get players and coaches playing for the clubs, or get feature a fan and stuff like that. So we've done episodes with fans. I think it was we've done so far with Mumbai City FC and Bengaluru FC fans on the show, particularly on the podcast perspective, because one was, I think, after the Mumbai City FC won a tournament. I forget the timeline of it, when I got them, but twice that I got them was before or after a crucial period that their club was involved. And why Mumbai? Because I'm based in Bombay, accessibility to the fan group, and they're some of my friends, so I can get them to the studio. The whole feel also of being in the studio with people in there is a different ball game altogether than doing it online. So, and especially I want to do with fans, so I'm like, might as well get them into the studio. So that's why I have had them twice, because you have access to them. The other set of fans were BFC fans, Bengaluru FC fans. I did that again online. It was right after a season to just talk about, because they had a great season. They ended up as runners up in that league where no one expected them to actually do that. How do I go about with them? Then it's like, yeah, like you mentioned, it's a vast audience and they want to know what their players are doing. They want to know about transfer market and stuff. But as I said, now that it's been some time that people are aware of what the show brings, so nobody comes to us for breaking news or transfer updates or stuff. They know they're coming for some stories. They know they're coming to know about someone they didn't know, or know a little more about someone that they knew of very vaguely. And going ahead, I would like for this to be also that bridge that connects people, knowingly or unknowingly. Even that has happened where people have got to know about someone through the show, and then they've connected and they've gone ahead to collaborate or something. And so that's been really good to know that people have met or spoken for the first time on the show, and then they've interacted. And the other aspect is that many of my guests have said that it's the first time they've been on a podcast, so I think that's also helped. And that's also good to know that, okay, that's where the start is, having an exposure to the show. You had asked me initially before some time back that is there something like this in Indian football. Now there are podcasts, but there are two other shows which is kind of consistent as well, and both are I mean, I know them, they're good friends, but it's more of the aspect of the show is different. It's like with mine is storytelling, and I put out one every week. With them, it's more of talking about what's happening in Indian football. So there may not be a guest as such, but it'll be three people, like I said, how the panel I started with. So it'll be journalists or folks coming and just discussing and dissecting what's happening in Indian football, mainly to do with news, tournaments, all of those stuff. So what I'm doing is probably the only thing that's happening in Indian football right now. The way I'm doing it, with getting different kinds of people. Like I've had on the show, we featured like entrepreneurs, coaches, players. So it's different kind of people, like literally different kinds of voices. Every time, even I am amazed that I'm like, I look back at it, 99 different episodes, different people. So it's good to know that there are so many kinds of various aspects of like we've had sports scientists, we've had strength and conditioning coach, we've had a journalist, we've had so it's like it's a crazy diverse place. Probably also lets people know that how many different aspects are there to one sport as also.
And once we are kind of a versatile show, then we start enjoying that particular show as well, because we are able to talk with different people. It doesn't get monotonous as well. And that is the fancy thing about podcasting, is what I believe. You never know like what kind of people you will be meeting, having that conversation, and then audience will be relating. They will be coming back to you that I loved this conversation. This is something that I was hoping to listen to. While having this conversations, how do you feel about like, does it really contribute to raising awareness about a new interest in Indian football with respect to playing? Because we have seen that people, like I have seen, like I'm not a kind of a football fan, but still I tend to watch Euro Cup or like Olympics or the World Cup with respect to the football. But if you see the kind of buzz that goes on Twitter or on social media with respect to the fans, how that will be converting into people getting into the professional football thing. So can podcast help with respect to that?
See, I think with my show or any other podcast for that matter in any field, since we're talking about football, we'll stick to that. Will it help people? I mean, will it help in kids coming out and playing and then profession and then that multiplying into adding into becoming professional players? See, it I wouldn't say a completely or a big no, but it's not a very big yes also. It plays a small part in just building awareness, like I said. to let people know that there is an Indian football scene happening, though whether it's messed up or not, that's something when you get to know when you're into it. But to be able to say that, okay, there is this show that's talking about these people, so so you're aware that, okay, there are these kind of jobs or these kind of roles that are available for you, even for somebody who doesn't want to play but wants to work in different fields. So I've had management students saying that, oh, I didn't know that there's a whole new thing of, and how does an agent's life go about this. This was interesting. Or how did someone, a academy owner or a coach kind of become that. So it plays a role in building awareness. Now, does that convert into a kid coming out and playing? It really depends on literally the exposure and where the kid is. I mean, like, say, what is the exposure for them among where they are growing up, and also the interest, right? Does this help in growing interest? That's a good question. I mean, it's a good point for all of us to think about. But as of now, if I have to put it across, right now the show is for somebody who already has an interest, who's already following, who's also a fan. But it does have a potential for those also who don't know about it, because like I said, it's not the episodes that, if you listen to any of the episodes, they're not too technical in sport per se. We are not
Hmm.
dissecting a game. We are not
Yeah.
talking 4-3-3 and 4-2-1, and people are like, "Wha- okay, it's too much numbers and formation, then I don't understand this," because they're just pure stories about people. So that's one USP that I hold. I mean, I would say for our show is that even if you don't follow football, you can definitely listen to my episode and probably be educated. Oh, this person works this. Oh, wow. I mean, this is a role, seriously. And then maybe that builds, like, probably you're curious to know, or you will probably in your circle then understand, oh, there's somebody who I know who's a friend of mine who's a football fan or who plays football. So maybe I'll suggest this show to that person. Or then that's how, like, it would build and grow. But having said that, definitely, like how we have YouTube as our, most of us have learned things from YouTube videos. I'm sure that way also it will help in, probably, if you introduce podcasts to kids at that age who are growing, just like, how we encourage them to read books if they listen to shows. Maybe we can have a show centered, and that's a good idea. Like, maybe I should also think about it now.
Yeah.
Like maybe something that is
It's
sent.
more about the conditioning.
Yeah, I think something that's very catered. It has to be well curated for then that age group, the age group that you want to target, which is a grassroots period where, say, from between 12 to 18, that period. So what will they want to know about playing football? Or is it the pathway, the grassroots, what is available, what is not available, how to start, how to become a player, who do they reach out to? So yeah, so then again it becomes a very well curated thought process show. But otherwise, as of now, it plays, shows like mine or any other would play, I would play it plays a small role for sure in building awareness, at
Yeah,
least.
but that's sizable. Like it's there, like something exists rather than nothing. So it's more kind of that story. And as you said, like you'll be definitely having a great and newer segment for the people who are willing to go into it. So you can definitely tweak the content accordingly and have a new concept into it so that more and more people will be enjoying. Now, coming on to the last part before we have some fun thing at the end as well, would love to know from you with respect to your podcasting journey that what was the most rewarding aspect of it, and if you have one advice for the people who are willing to contribute to the Indian football in any ways through podcasting, what would be that?
Oh, so the most thing first, so your first point was the most rewarding thing, right? In the whole.
Yeah, yeah, aspect of your
Hmm.
journey with respect to podcasting.
Yeah, I think it's about, like I said, sometime in the middle of the conversation, I mentioned about being the vehicle to kind of share and bring the stories out. Though it highlights that, okay, this person, this coach or this player, for example, say, let me just take a name. Maybe I got to chat with Fan Coach co-founder, okay, or Tom Bayer, who's known to be like the most well-known faces or the brains for football in Asia, because he's known to be especially an expert in Japanese football. He's really grown football in Japan. So when I sit down with them, I think about, like, okay, at the end of the day, yes, people come onto the show because I've got Tom Bayer. But then the fact that there's also a small hindsight in looking back at, okay, I was the one to kind of help, kind of bring that story out, and that kind of is one of the rewarding things. The other major rewarding thing is the conversation itself. Like, there have been days where I've been for some other reasons I've been low and not wanting to do, or not wanting to do anything, but I'm like, okay, I have to do the episode. So I've gone, entered the studio, done the recording, and that's the most joyful I've been. Like right after I hit the record button, I've had the conversation and I'm done, and I'm like, that whole emotion is like, wow, thank God I did this episode. So that whole process is very rewarding. That sitting for research, doing the recording, reaching out to the guests, talking to them, the recording itself, and then just the joy after that. Little other things I would say is that how, you just need that one person and one push. So there's this one particular listener of ours. His name is Roshan, and we've not met. We know of each other on Twitter itself, but he's an avid listener of our show. And the reason I can say that is some of the days where even I've missed out on sharing that, okay, the episode is live, he's the one who tweets saying the episode is out. And I'm like, oh, the episode is out, I missed it. And the little DMs that he shares with us saying that, hey, good episode, thanks for sharing. I'm like, okay, if nobody else, I will do an episode just for this, just for Roshan. So I have to like appreciate people like him who've really like pushed me through without knowing the fact that what I was going through. Like I've had like bad days, but this just those small kind words and gestures have helped me reach 99. I would say that's how I would put it. So I think all of this is very rewarding. And like I said, though it may seem to be that one person driving everything, it's definitely a huge team and a huge support system that takes you forward. And yeah, the other aspect, sorry, the other point that you asked, what can one do? What can one do? Starting with follow and subscribe to the Total Indian Football Show. we are we are an audio show available on all the audio platforms. Hopefully, maybe one day, okay, we do a video as well because everybody is going that way. It's also as the in buzz.
That's totally fine. I love the audio essence of the podcasting. That is the best thing that I enjoy. It's more about like how you want to cater to the audience.
Apart from that, I think, yeah, if you are someone who, I would just say, if you're someone who likes football, follows an avid follower of and watches leagues across, and which is like miles away from where you are. I've also grown up watching that. But if you're a football fan, if you call yourself one, come out and support your local football clubs. Go down, watch your games. There's nothing that beats the experience of watching a live game. There have been days where I've dragged myself out to the lowest point, but the moment I reach the ground, I'm like, wow, this is good, because the atmosphere, the people around, because so stuff like that. So I think it starts off from there. What they can do is all of that and support all of these. There are so many of us who do it out of passion, right? So just support people who do that and don't always go behind numbers. I am doing purely because when I do an episode with someone, I do it because I want to share his or her story. Yes, one day the numbers game will bite into me and saying that, okay, because then you want brands to come in, you want some kind of something going about with this. But until then, I would say I do it because you want to do it, and not because, yeah, I purely do anything, especially with regarding to storytelling, is because, okay, I want to share this story. I am not thinking whether I'm not thinking whether Rohit will like it or not. I'm like, I love this, so I'm doing it.
That's a good approach. And as I said, that the kind of intent that we'll be having with the show will define its future course of action, and we just have to keep going at it. And we keep doing that because we love the kind of medium we are into. We love the kind of model that we have for the show because it's about the sports. You love talking about it, you love football, and that is how it keeps you going. So it's more about into the podcasting arena as well. Like if you take up that particular topic which you love to talk about, where you don't have to think about what I'm going to talk, how I'm going to relate to that particular thing, to whom I'm going to talk. It all becomes irrelevant when we are so passionate about that particular topic and the subject. So the show will keep going on, and I hope that this particular show of yours goes global as well. Like you travel places, you record with great footballers as well, and the coaches, and a lot of people who are working into this industry. And when we are moving to the last part, we have few bonus questions for the listeners. It's kind of a rapid fire. I would love to know from you, who is your all-time favorite Indian footballer and why?
I would say Baichung Bhutia. I mean, I would have probably picked I am Vijayan also, but I haven't seen him play. I've only heard stories about him. Now that I've seen much of Baichung play also, maybe towards the end of, I've seen at least there are some good clips of him. Now, people would say I would have picked Chetri because it's a very easy pick to have. But Baichung, because he was the flag bearer, right? Like he was truly the flag bearer for Indian football at the global level, also. One of the longest serving national team captains. Really a phenomenal player, a striker, a forward in its truest essence. So on the pitch, and I think one of the most genuine people off the pitch as well. I still remember meeting him for the first time and I fumbled because I was still 21 barely. And I'm like, wow, here, this is like, I was at loss of words. And then years later, have worked for his academy. I mean, the last stint I had recently that I have left was Baichungutia Football Schools. So definitely he's doing his bit, giving back to the sport as well. I think the genuineness, that's why I like he is what he is, whether on pitch or off the pitch. So yeah.
Yeah, he has been an inspiration for all of us. Like we have been watching him since long. So glad to know that. If you talk about what's your most memorable match coverage experience, like be it the joyous or heartbreaking, what it could be.
Oh, I think that's an easy pick. Though there could be a couple of them backing that, but I'll pick two. One has to be the Aizol trip. I went to Aizol to cover Mohan Bagan versus Aizol. And this was a very crucial match because whoever won this game it was confirmed that the trophy is theirs because there was only one match after this. But Mohan Bagan had to win it. It was that kind of a situation. And they're traveling away from home. So my entire journey itself is a story. Probably that we'll have another day. But that match experience, I think it was raining, like it was literally pouring. Okay. And if it was any other city, people wouldn't have turned up. But it was Aizol and everyone turned up. Families turned up. They brought their kids, they are wearing their wind cheaters, they are wearing their raincoats, the umbrellas are open, but no one's missing the game. And it was cloudy. You couldn't see the game properly. I was not in the journalist stand, I was not in the press box, I was in the fan stand, walking from one end to the other, trying to see the game. I mean, because you can't clearly see the game, it was super cloudy. And I think around 83rd or 84th minute is where the goal comes in, and Izol win it 1-0. And I was like, it was amazing to witness that. The drums were beating. It was a crazy atmosphere. So that for sure. The other bit I would say is the first time I saw Sunil Chetri live. It was in Mumbai at the Cooperage ground when a club called Mumbai FC existed back then. This was the I League game. I was with my sister, and I remember, and it's a Cooperage stadium. If one has been there, it's a very close view stadium. Like, you can literally see the action up close. So if you're sitting at one, if you're in a stand and a player is very right, if you shout, the player can hear you. That's how close it is. So I remember watching BFC versus Mumbai FC and I'm telling my sister, nudging her, I'm like, that's Sunil Chetri, a big smile on my face. And so yeah, so that was, I think these two is what I can recollect now was one of the,
Those
yeah.
were great one. And if you could interview any figure from Indian football history, who would it would be and why?
I've had like a privilege to really blessed to have interviewed among the 1960s a player from then called Franco Sir, who passed away during COVID. I spent beautiful 2 hours with him in his house in Goa, and I was so ecstatic, so happy, and so blessed to have shared his story through Humans of Indian Football. It's on our page. We didn't do a show; it was a proper, full featured write up story that we did on our social media platforms. And I don't think I'll ever forget that 2 hours with him. Also, there's a movie called Maidan coming, and it's about the 1960s Indian team, which was also coached by an Indian coach, about Rahim Sir, who was the first ever Indian football team coach, and Franco Sir was part of that team. So for me to be able to, like, he literally went down memory lane, talking about different stories. So I think have had the blessing to do that. But otherwise, if I had to sit down with someone from back in the days, it will be someone like PK Banerjee and all of these guys, Chunni Goswami, again, all of these legends who we lost in the recent COVID time. But yeah, I think it's yeah, all of these yesteryear players. Maybe I would have, now that I think of, would have liked to sit down with Taliraman now He was the first captain and the I think player from Nagaland. So it's that would have been fascinating to sit down with him.
Great to know, and there's so much to discover about the football because, as you were speaking, as you were sharing all of these names, there are a few heroes that have contributed to this sport, and they all should be spoke more about because if we know more about them, then there will be a kind of a craze for it. Then people will be thinking about let's do that for them. That is how it grows. And again, it's such a great game because, as you talked about Mohan Bagan as well, you are just playing into that particular rainy situation, and it doesn't stop people from coming to watch that particular game. So it's the kind of a craze that this sport has got, and I feel that this craze will rise more and more through the kind of awareness, through the kind of shows that you have been doing or the episodes that you have been rolling out, and people like you who have been putting out the stories of the people through journalism and whatsoever. It really does help to build that particular momentum and gain the kind of attraction that we are seeing. And it's always an effort. We see that the kind of a league is not working, the kind of players we are not able to see into that particular league. It's more about the effort that counts, and I hope that this effort keeps growing with each and every passing day. And Siju, it has been a great conversation with you. I'll definitely say this as a conversation because I loved the kind of vibe you created on this show, shared more about football, shared about whoever has helped you, the way you have been doing your podcast show, the kind of approach you have been following. It has been such a great learning experience for me as well to look out podcasting in a very different situation, to give it a very different look, and more people who are willing to start something into this particular niche, it will really help them. So I'm really thankful for all of your insights, and it has been a great conversation with you. So thank you.
Well, Rohit, thank you so much. I mean, thank you for all the kind words. This was great conversation. I don't know how good I was in answering questions, but like I said, I'm probably better on the seat that you're sitting. But just on a side note, what you are also doing, I think it's quite encouraging and really good to see because you're highlighting podcasters themselves, right? So and different kinds of shows, and I was going through the episodes and you've really delved into different kinds of topics. It's definitely going to educate people who want to know about podcast and about how to grow or how to start. I think it's a great thing that you're doing, and I think all of us driving from passion. Hopefully we all get rewarded as well. But Rohit, thank you so much for this time, and once again thank you so much, and I wish you the best for even your show ahead.
Pleasure is all mine, and thank you so much for those kind words. It's just about the medium that keeps me going. It has made me creative, and I love doing all of this. So, just an effort to promote more and more about podcasting, learn more about podcasting from different people, and that is how we grow. And I hope to meet you in person very soon. Let's see when it happens, and we'll definitely have a great conversation with respect to football again. And I hope that I'll be able to raise my interest with respect to football more higher than what I it was earlier before recording this episode. So definitely you made that effort, and that I go with respect to the football, like I get educated about it, and then I spread more knowledge about it. So thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. Pleasure is all mine. Stay happy, stay healthy. Bye bye. Take care. We hope you have liked the podcast episode we have had today on PodPeeps. By the way, if you want to join Podcasters community, fill the form from link in the show notes. And yes, thank you so much for being here today. Do send us a DM on Instagram at DFY Podcast if you follow Indian Podcasting Revolution. And if you are yet to follow, what are you waiting for? Follow it now and join us next week for yet another episode. This is your host Rohit, signing off.